Hey guys, it's John with CheatSheetPros.com. Today we're going to take a look at our college football Week 10 best bets. Today is November 3rd, 2021. We're going to look at these games on our NCAA betting cheat sheet, and then we're also going to use our point-wise betting tool that shows us all the games, the spread, the closing line, final scores, records, yardages, all that good stuff that you need to know. So, as always, the YouTube video has some bonus games in here that are not in the article. The article on the website, CheatSheetPros.com, will have the top 5 to 6, and then we will kind of scroll down and add probably another 5, 6, 7 games on top of it. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up where I had left off before I stopped this, and we're going to go up and then right back down. So one of the first games we like is Kansas State laying 24 against Kansas. Kansas home field ATS is only 29% since 2016, so they are not very good at football. Basketball is a different story. Power ranking wise, we've got Kansas State about 23% better. PFF has this line at 23. We have it at 29. Vegas line is 24, so we like laying the 24. Basically, just Kansas has no defense. They're ranked 127th in yards per game, giving up 511.4 yards per game, which is absolutely absurd. I think Kansas State can have its way and pretty much do whatever it needs to do to win this game. 24 is not a huge spread. I mean, it's big, but it's not like the 38 that Georgia's laying. Our skew model down here, we have it somewhere around 41 to 15. And then the yard per point, we've got Kansas State, who's better than league average at 13.4, and Kansas is about 30% worse than league average at 20.7, giving a huge edge to Kansas State. So that's one of the games that we do like. Moving on, one of the totals that we're going to discuss today is SMU at Memphis. So line-wise, we're not really going to look at it. PFF has SMU minus 14. We've got it minus 4. The actual line on this is minus 5, so our algo line is closer to Vegas. But I'm not going to take a side in this game. I am going to take the total over. So here you can see both teams are giving up over 400 yards on defense. And then on the offensive side of the ball, they're putting up a massive amount of yards, a combined 950 offensive yards, and that's just average per game. Points per game, we have about 70, and then giving up points per game, we have about 60. So a massive amount of points should be scored. They both have really good YPP numbers. Going up against these defenses, we've skewed it down to 10.2 and 11.5, which is really good when you want a game to go over the total. A quick total check on ours, we have 71.1 as just a rough total of what we think it could be. The line is 70.5, and I like it to go over that total. When we go over here and we look at SMU, let me slide down here in our point-wise betting sheet. So SMU, all right, here we are. Let me make sure you can see that. Look at how many points they're scoring. 37 to 44, 55 to 26, 31 to 24, and that was against Navy, who runs the ball and kills the clock a lot. They still put up 55 there. And then you have 41-17 against South Florida, who has no offense. And then 42-34 against TCU, 39-37. So I like going over 70.5 here. Two good offenses against two really bad defenses that are really efficient. I mean, that's everything you need for an over. Moving up the list, we talked about that game. So Appalachian State over Arkansas State. So let me go ahead and pull these two up. And if you're new to the cheat sheet, these two boxes, you just pick the team. You can type it in, which you'll see me do the majority of the time. Or you can click in here and scroll up and down. It has all 130 college football teams. So we have Appalachian State about 19% better. Typically, I find some of these lines are a little bit lower because of their smaller conferences. Arkansas State is 1-7 and 0-4 in the Sun Belt Conference, and Appalachian State is 6-2, 3-1 in the conference. So you can see Arkansas State, they have the ability to hold the worst ranking on defense at 130th. Giving up almost 600 yards per game. So Appalachian State, we know they can score some points. They've been pretty effective. So we have the 21st offense in terms of yards per game at 455, going up against the worst defense. They are going to put up some points, and they should put up a lot of them. Arkansas State, decent, 393. But Appalachian State, they've got a decent defense. So what I like to see here is they're averaging 393. They're giving up 389. So we can easily say Arkansas State, if they put up 390 Yards, that's fair. We can kind of put them in that ballpark. But then you go over here to a team that's scoring a lot of points. They're averaging 33.4 per game, putting up 455, and now they're facing a defense that's given up 590. That is just absurd. So we have a difference in yardage here of 263 more yards for Appalachian State. And we have them skewed to a better YPP. They play at 13.6. We've got them edged down to 10.9 based on the defense that they're facing, which is about 33% better than league average. Our skew model here has it 44-21, so them winning by about 23. PFF has them as a 31-point favorite. So PFF is typically very low on the lines. They're not heavy by any means. They keep games a lot closer than what they should be. So that kind of jumped out at me when I was running through these games. The line's only Appalachian State minus 21. I definitely think that's something that they can do. And let's flip up here, take a look at their game logs and see if there's anything that jumps out. So here we go. We got Appalachian State. Let me make sure you can see that on your screen. So they played at L.A. Monroe, 59-28. Coastal Carolina was a really good game. They won 30-27. L.A. Lafayette, don't know what happened to that game. Georgia State, they beat them 45-16. So this is probably more in the range of what we're looking at this week, is like a 45-16 type of game. I'm not going to go through and compare Georgia State versus Arkansas State. They're both not great teams, so that's kind of in the ballpark that we're putting them. So Appalachian State, they can run up some points against bad teams, and this week they get the worst team. So that's one of the ones we really like. Scrolling up here at the top, Missouri and Georgia. So typically what I do every week, there's a sports book out there. I don't put any money in it, but they typically send me a free bet, every couple of weeks. And I find a great big parlay with huge money line favorites, put it together like somewhere 7, 8, 9, 10 of them, and it'll pay plus 200, plus 300, somewhere in that ballpark. This is the perfect game to put on there. So Georgia's minus 38. You can get a first half money line throw on there. That's as close to a lock, but you need to get a bunch of them in there. What really jumped out at me is we all know Georgia's defense, number 2 best in the land, only allowing 227 yards per game and 6.6 points per game. And then you've got Missouri, who has the 121st ranked defense that's given up 490 yards per game. Now, Georgia's laying 38. If you want to do a 2 or 3 team parlay, I don't mind putting Georgia minus 38 in there. They should cover that, but it is a lot of points. One of the first bets I made this week was I took 2 NFL games, and I took Georgia and on a 3-team 10-point teaser, and I took Georgia from 38 down to minus 28. I love it at minus 28. However, one of the games I did have in there were the Green Bay Packers, who I took from +1 to +11. And then this morning, Aaron Rodgers tested positive for COVID, and since he's unvaccinated, they've already ruled him out for the game. So I still have +11 with 2 good running backs against the Chiefs, who can't stop the run. I'm a big Chiefs fan, but I think they can keep that within 11. So there's still some hope there. One of the other games we're going to look at is the first game on the slate, and that's Army and Air Force, and I think it's a 10:30 a.m. kickoff game. So these two teams, the 2 best rushing teams in the land, sitting at 1st and 2nd in rush yards per game. So offensively, they're about the same. Defensively, they're about the same, but I'm giving the edge here to Air Force because they have a home field ATS record that's 64% since 2016. And they're only laying 2.5 points. So that's basically saying these teams are identical, except for Air Force gets 2.5 points for being at a home field advantage. And one thing that I really like when looking through the sheet is when the PFF line and our algo line both agree and is significantly different than the Vegas spread, then that's something that kind of flips up a green flag for me to earmark this game, come back and look at it. Our skew line, we have a tight game here, 27-23. We have Air Force winning by 5. Slightly better in the power rankings. Slightly better on the defensive side of the ball. And with PFF having it at 8.5, our algo has it at 8, and then Vegas only has it at 2.5. I'm going to go ahead and lean Air Force here and lay the 2.5. Now let me scroll back down to my place here so we can get on to our next game. North Texas Southern Miss. Oh my gosh, that's going to be a ugly game. I'll go ahead and give you one. One of the big games by point-wise this week is California and Arizona. So I haven't looked at this game yet. I did not have it earmarked to go over, but it's one of their favorite plays. So let's go ahead and take a look at it together. So we have California about 12% better. PFF has it at -18. We have it at -13. So let's see. The Vegas line is Cal -12. Both Pac-12 teams. California's 3-5, and then Arizona's terrible. They're 0-8 and 0-5 in the Pac-12. So you can see they've got one of the worst offenses, sitting at 95th in yards per game. Cal's pretty decent, 54th, 41st, so top 55 offensive defense. So putting up about 50 more yards per game on offense and allowing about 50 yards less per game. So we have a yardage difference of about 100 yards. So what you got to figure out is that 100-yard difference, does that equate to the -12 spread that Vegas has on there? And I think it's definitely possible. When you click down here and you look at this yard per point, so both teams are worse than league average right now. And then we're not going to skew it any because we think it's a fair matchup. Our skew line has it here at exactly 12, 30-18. So that kind of shied me away from the game. But when PFF has it and it's a big game by point-wise, it's one we always want to kind of take a look at. So the first thing I want to do is go up here and look at Arizona and see what their game logs look like. So we have Arizona, who's 0-8. They played Southern Cal. They put up 34. So they only lost that game by a touchdown, and they were a 3-touchdown dog, so that's pretty good. And then they played Washington as a 17-point dog, and they only lost by 5. So their last 2 games, I'd say they've played pretty well. They played a bad Colorado team and got blown out 34-0. So it looks like they had struggled, and then the last 2 games they had done really well, and they are at home this week. So I don't know. Point-wise has this as a big game. I'm kind of shying away from it. Let me see. They beat Colorado 26-3. They beat Oregon State 39-25. So they've picked up some steam here. So make your own decision. If you like it, it's a big game for point-wise. I think it was a large PFF green line money play too. But me, I'm kind of on the fence. Arizona's played 2 games, decent. They're at home. I would lean California just because that's where everything's kind of pointing. But statistically on my sheet, it doesn't really jump out at me as a big play. So that's one I'm going to shy off of. Going down here to the next game that I like. This is going to be a tight game. We have Oklahoma State at West Virginia. So both of these teams had great games last week. I could pull up and show you the game logs and the yardages and blah, blah, blah. Just say they were both good. So we have Oklahoma State at about 7% better in the power rankings, 54-45. PFF has Oklahoma State -10.5. Our algo has it -6. The Vegas spread came in at Oklahoma State -3. So I was kind of shocked whenever, like I said before, when PFF and our algo line are both going to eclipse the Vegas spread by a decent amount of points. That's what I want to take a look at. So just real quick looking at the game, we have 2 decent offenses. They're about the same. But defensively, this is the flag here that's jumping out at me. So you have the number 4 defense in terms of yards per game allowed versus the 72nd. So on offense, both teams are doing pretty good. Defensively, though, Oklahoma State's only allowing 289 yards per game versus just over 400 for West Virginia. So with both of these teams being somewhat equal, that 100 yards, that's going to eclipse the -3 spread. So I like laying the 3 here with Oklahoma State on the road. Our skew model down here, we've got this game at 29-20. So we have Oklahoma State winning by 9, which is not quite as great as the PFF spread, a little higher than our algo spread, but we do like Oklahoma State -3 here. Going down to the next game, we've got Baylor and TCU. You like that? I made a little joke. TCU. My kids would be proud. So here we have Baylor about 6% better. PFF line 14.5. Our algo line's -7. Typically, our algo line is going to be a little closer to Vegas. The Vegas line is Baylor -6.5 on the road. TCU is 3-5. Baylor is 7-1 and 4-1 in the Big 12. And asking them to go on the road and beat a bad TCU team by a touchdown, I don't think is too far-fetched. Offensively, as far as yards, they're both decent. But right here, once again, look at this defensive difference. TCU coming in at the 119th ranked defense in terms of yards per game, 487 yards per game allowed. Now, on offense, we've seen this before. Both teams about the same, 431, 437, but defensively, it's another story. TCU is giving up the 120th most rush yards and 99th most pass yards, so they're bad on both sides of the ball. So I'm not worried about, can Baylor run, can they pass, what's their strength versus what's TCU's weakness. TCU's whole weakness is defense. I mean, they rank 119th. They're not good. Baylor is going to score. They are going to put points on the board, and I don't think TCU can stay in this game. So down here, Baylor has a very good defense. So they're 351 yards per game allowed, which is 37th. They're 29th least rush yards allowed per game. And then middle of the road, a little better than middle of the road in terms of pass yards per game. In terms of efficiency, their YPP, yard per point numbers, they're slightly better at 13 versus 14.8. And then as far as yardage, we've got about 130 additional yards for Baylor in this game. And so the 130 yards divided by even league average YPP, that's going to cover your -6.5 spread. So our skew model down here, we've got this at 35-24. We've got Baylor easily winning by 11. So Baylor -6.5 is another game I like. And now that I've talked about it, I like it. I even like it a little bit more. Scrolling down here to the next game, Wisconsin is one that really jumped out when I was running these. So typically I run every game through the cheat sheet. I look at it, I look at game logs, and I earmark about 30 games, and I get it down to 20 games, and then I get it down around 10 to 15 games, and then that's the ones I talk about and kind of look into a little further. So Wisconsin is going on the road to Rutgers. Rutgers is 4-4, 1-4 in the Big Ten. Wisconsin is 5-3, 3-2 in the Big Ten. PFF has Wisconsin as 22 points better than Rutgers. Our algo has them at 17 points better. So what did we say before? When the PFF line and the algo line are significantly different than the Vegas line, that's a game we want to look into. The Vegas line is Wisconsin -13. So you can see here we've got it easily covering. Our skew model, however, we've got it 26-16, so we have it as a 10-point game, so we have it a little bit different. Both teams about the same in YPP numbers, nothing that really jumps off. Offensively, about the same. We know Wisconsin's been getting better. They're going uphill, and Rutgers is kind of sliding and going downhill. But defensively, this jumps out at me. Wisconsin moved into the #1 defensive team as far as yards allowed per game. They only allow 49.6 rush yards per game, which is best in the entire college football. And then the 6th least amount of passing yards per game. They're only giving up 214 yards per game on defense. That is absolutely ridiculous. So both of these teams about the same. Wisconsin's putting up a little more yards. But defensively, I mean, we've got a 193-yard gap here that's going to go to Wisconsin. So with those 193 yards, we need to be able to cover the spread of Wisconsin -13. I think that's definitely possible and definitely doable. The total on this game is only 37.5, which I thought was kind of funny, but I'm not going to touch that total. So let's go down and take a look at a game log real quick because I want to make sure before I give you this game that I do like it. So we have Wisconsin here. So, okay, they came out last week and they throttled Iowa 27-7. They came out and they beat Purdue, which was supposed to be a close game, 30-13. So their last two games, they've played really well. And they had a road game, home game, and then let's go take a look at Rutgers. So Wisconsin's playing really good football right now. And college teams are so hot and cold. You really got to catch them when they're hot and then fade them when they're cold. So Rutgers, they started off on fire. They had, so that Delaware didn't have a line, but then they had 3 games where they were 3-0 ATS. They rolled Temple 61-14. They beat Syracuse. They played Michigan, and it was 20-13 as a almost 3-touchdown dog, so they were really good. And then all of a sudden, they kind of went downhill. So they played Ohio State, got blown out, which that was fine. Ohio State's on fire right now. Michigan State, they got blown up 31-13. Michigan State's playing really good. But Northwestern is not a good football team, and they were a 2.5-point favorite, and they lost 21-7. They only managed 7 points against Northwestern. So Wisconsin should definitely be able to keep their score down on the game. And then they played Illinois last week, which they end up winning 20-14. I was kind of shocked by that. So Rutgers is one of those teams that's kind of up and down, and they are at home. But the last home game they had against Michigan State, they lost 31-13 as a plus 4-point dog. But now they're playing Wisconsin, who is better than Michigan State and better defensively. And we've got a short line of 13, so I like laying the 13 here. If you tease it, I almost love it. But the 13 straight up, I'm good with it because PFF and my algo has 17, so I'm fine laying the 13. Let's scroll down and find another game we can take a look at. Rhode Island, UMass, not touching that. Mississippi, Arkansas, that should be a good game. NC State, Florida State. Coastal Carolina, Georgia Southern. Did I have that one earmarked? Okay, let's look at that one. I had it and then I crossed it off. Coastal Carolina. And then Georgia Southern. So this line is Coastal Carolina minus 20. And Coastal Carolina has kind of been slowing down a little bit. PFF and our algo both have it covering 2024. Georgia Southern, whenever I see these small like Sun Belt Conference schools that are, well, they're 2-6 and they've got a, minus 12 plus minus, it's one that kind of jumps out at me. Coastal Carolina, they've struggled against some good teams, but they've been able to pummel some bad teams. And, Georgia Southern, the 93rd offense, 120th defense. They're giving up almost 500 yards on defense. And then Coastal's putting up almost 500 yards on offense. Coastal laying 20, I don't mind that. I mean, they can do that, right? Let's go ahead and take a look at their game log. This might be one I add back in. I had it, I crossed it, and then I had it, and so I was kind of going back and forth. So Coastal Carolina, okay, we got them up here. Make sure you can see that on your screen. Yeah, so they had a 3-game run here where they beat UMass 55-3, LA Monroe 59-6, and Arkansas State 52-20. But those teams are garbage. They are absolutely nothing. And then they played Appalachian State and lost by 3. Then they played Troy and barely won by a touchdown. So Georgia Southern, I would want to see how they compare to Arkansas State and LA Monroe. So let's go up and look at the power rankings. So we're going to go up and look at LA Monroe. So LA Monroe has a power ranking here of 22. And then Arkansas State, I think that was the other one. Arkansas State has a power ranking of 27. And so they beat up on those teams. And then this week they're playing Georgia Southern. So let's see if their power ranking falls in there. All right, it falls in at a 28. So it's real close to Arkansas State. So let's go back down here to Coastal Carolina. So I'm trying to walk you through the thought process that I look at a little bit. So they played Arkansas State, which is real similar to Georgia Southern, and beat them 52-20. So they beat them by 32. And this game is almost identical. Coastal Carolina is minus 20 on the road, and they were minus 20.5 on the road against Arkansas State. Now, they have struggled these last 2 games, so I'm a little worried about that. But if you're going to take some of these kind of iffy games that you don't really know about, I would put Coastal in that kind of tier 3 category. I like to parlay 2 or 3 of them up. Just if I hit 1 or 2, I have a sweat, but I don't risk a lot of money and get a much better payout. Coastal's one that jumps on my list. And then one of the big games that everybody's going to talk about that I want to go ahead and get on here is LSU at Alabama. So Alabama's a covering machine. Let me see if I put any stats down there for them. Okay, so I didn't. So I'm just going to take a look at this game. So Alabama's minus 28.5, and I know a lot of people are going to be on this. So PFF has them by 3 touchdowns. We have them by 27, so really close to the Vegas line. LSU, the 107th ranked defense versus the 8th offense. Alabama's going to put up some points here. LSU is going to struggle, but again, 4 touchdowns plus 1. I just decided to stay away from it this week. My skew model has it around 42-20, so we have them winning by 22, but 28.5 is a lot of points. So they should cover it, but it's one that I'm going to stay away from just because the spread is really high. So one of the games I do like is Tennessee at Kentucky. So when this game popped up, so 0, that means our algo line is pretty much pick 'em. PFF has Kentucky by, just ate lunch, by 4 or 4.5 points, whichever way you want to round it. Tennessee has a good offense going up against a good defense, and then we have a weaker offense going up against a weaker defense, so this makes for an interesting game. YPP is almost identical, 13.3, 13.7. Our model has it 27-27, so we have both of these teams really close. Kentucky is minus 1. Now, one of the stats that jumps out right here is Kentucky at home is 60% ATS since 2016, so they are a very good home play. So what I want to do is go and take a look at the game logs for Kentucky and see, are they getting better? Are they getting worse? Because when we look at the season averages, we know that's going to change. So they played Mississippi State last week, 31-17. They hung with Georgia, you could say, losing by 17. I consider that hanging with Georgia, or keeping Georgia to only 30 points is pretty good. They beat up on LSU pretty good. They actually beat Florida as a 7.5-point dog. The one thing that jumps out at me, so the Caps right here, the Salt teams, that means they were at home. And so at home, they beat Florida 20-13 as a 7-point dog. And then they beat LSU as a 2-point favorite, 42-21. So they pummeled them. They went on the road to Georgia and lost the game. No big deal. But they did cover the spread. I don't know what happened on the road at Mississippi State. I'm not going to dig into that game because this isn't one of my favorite games. But they come back home to play Tennessee, and it's pretty much a pick'em game. So we know they've done really good at home, and they've been a really solid team. So let's take a look at Tennessee. Scroll down here. So Tennessee, the last 2 games, they played at home against Mississippi, lost by 5. They played Alabama, got pummeled, but they did manage to put up 24 points. And then they're going on the road to Kentucky. So this is a game I think is really close to pick'em, but I'm going to lean Kentucky here. For some reason, I just really like the way Kentucky's playing right now. And Tennessee is giving up over 100 more yards on defense. So hopefully Kentucky can keep that defense down and score some points. So that's kind of a tier 3 game for me that I like. Yeah, the only note I had down there was that they were great at home. So that's one of the bonus plays that I'm leaning on and liking. I didn't have Iowa down, but Iowa, now that I'm looking at it, is one that I think we need to be in consideration for. Oh, crap. Come on. There we go. Northwestern. So Iowa's minus 12 against Northwestern, but we have a significant difference here. One thing that jumped out at me when I was running games is Iowa's minus 12. PFF has them at, we'll say 21, and we got them at 17, so greatly different. So both offenses struggle, but look at the defensive side of the ball. Much different. So I think Iowa should be able to get enough points on here just to cover the 12 points, you would think. Our model has this 30-16, so we do have them slightly covering. So Iowa's one game that I am leaning towards. Some of these other later games, the Oregon State, Oregon's, Colorado's, they usually play late, and I haven't made it all the way down the list to take a look at them. But one that did jump at me when I was doing my first run through is Indiana at Michigan. So Indiana at Michigan. So Michigan's minus 20, so they're laying a lot of points. And the one thing looking at this, so PFF has them as only a 2-touchdown fave. We have them at minus 26. So I love laying the 20 when my line is saying 26. And then down here on our skew model, we got it 38-15. So we have a Michigan winning by 23. So Michigan minus 20 is one of the games that I lean on. Reason is, look at the significant difference in offense. So we have 109th versus 20th. And then defensively, middle of the pack versus 12th. So Michigan's playing really good football right now. As far as YPP, Indiana's really struggling. Their YPP numbers is 19, which league average is 15.5. That's yards per point, and they're playing at 19, which is really bad. And going up against this defense, we have it skewed slightly to 23.8, which is really bad. And then we're going to keep this 12.3 for Michigan going up against this defense because they're giving up 396 yards per game, and we're scoring 456, so we don't think that 12.3 is going to be a hard number to maintain. One of the things I do want to look at are the game logs for Indiana. Yeah, let me scroll up here. Indiana. So many schools. Okay, so Indiana started off and then, well, I thought they started off good. I guess they didn't. Loss, win. So, okay, so they are not really good against the spread. They are 1-6 ATS with their last win coming by a 1-point cover against Maryland on the road. Ohio State blew them out 54-7. Michigan State squeaked by them 20-15. Penn State beat them 24-0. Western Kentucky, they beat by 2, just barely as a 9-point favorite. Cincinnati's been all over the place, but beat them by 2 touchdowns. And, of course, they blew out Idaho. And then they actually did pretty decent in this game against Iowa, but that was the first game of the season. So I like to look back at the last 3 or 4 games. So they've only put up 0, 15, and 7 points before the 35 points against the know-nothing Maryland. And then now they have to go on the road and play Michigan at home. And then let's look at Michigan's number. We know they're playing a lot better right now. So Michigan here. Michigan State, they let one get away from them last week. So I'm worried that's going to hurt them a little bit mentally, but then they played Northwestern at home, beat them 33-7. That was expected. They squeaked by and beat Nebraska 32-29. This was an impressive win here against this Wisconsin team, 38-17. They put up 38 points against that Wisconsin defense. So I don't think Indiana is going to be much of a force for them. So I like laying the 20 here. These are typically fun because by halftime, you know if you've won the game or lost the game. And then one of the other ones going down the list is going to be Florida. Well, we're going to get a lot of games in this video. Florida at South Carolina. So this is one that I went ahead and I earmarked. So looking at these games, so this spread is Florida minus 18, which I thought was kind of low. PFF's has 16.5, so it's saying 18 is pretty good, but my algo has it at 23. And then going down here at our skew model, we've got it 35-16. So we have Florida winning by 18, spreads 18, so pretty close. The one big difference to me is, so the offensive O ranks here in yards per game, South Carolina is 117th. They're barely breaking 300 yards per game. And then Florida is 10th, putting up almost 500 yards per game. So drastically different offenses here. Defensively, they're both about the same in terms of yards per game, although Florida has a much tougher schedule played. They've got the 5th hardest schedule that they've played, and they're still allowing less yards per game, so I really like that. YPP, we've got average versus about 20% over league average, so we're fine there. Gap yards, we have Florida with about 207 more yards, so that 207 yards needs to be able to cover 18 points. And I definitely think we can get there. Skew model, we have them putting up 35 points, and I think the defense is enough to keep them down to 16 or less. So this is one that I do like. And the one thing that jumped out at me when I saw this game, I was kind of wondering why this line was low. It looked low to me. And so I ran over here to not South Florida, South Carolina. All right, South Carolina right here. And so their last three games, they're 0 I wish that thing quit kicking up. They're 0-3 ATS. They got blown out by Texas A&M 44-14, which is understandable. A&M's good. They got beat by Tennessee 45-20, which Tennessee is a good team. But this is the game that really sold it for me, is they played Vanderbilt, who Vanderbilt is awful. They're one of the worst teams. They have no defense. They can't stop anyone. And they barely beat them 21-20 as an 18.5 point favorite. As soon as I saw that, I was like, I don't care what Florida is doing. Florida is going to get some of my money this week. And we can flip back here, look at the Florida game real quick. Florida up here. So they played LSU 42-49. Then they played Georgia, lost 34-7. They also played Vanderbilt in the last 3 games. As a 39-point favorite, they beat them 42-0. So Florida beat Vanderbilt 42-0. So Florida likes these easy cake matchups, and they have one against South Carolina this week. South Carolina barely beat Vanderbilt. Florida beat them by 40. So I'm laying the 18 points and rolling with Florida. That's a no-brainer for me. Scrolling down here, let me see what other games I have that I didn't hit. I do have some additional stats that I didn't get when I was going over the games, and I'll recap those here at the end for you. So Houston, South Florida. This is another one that kind of jumped out at me. I think this is the last game I've got on tap for us to talk about because our video is pressing 33 minutes. So let's go ahead and take a look at this real quick. Houston is 7-1, 5-0 in the American, and South Florida is 1-3 in the American and 2-6 overall. Opposite plus minuses, Houston's winning by an average of 36-22. And then just the opposite, South Florida is losing an average of 20-34. So we have a 26-point difference between these two teams. PFF has Houston as a 24.5-point favorite, and then we've got it as a 16-point favorite. And then down here on our skew model, we've got a projected score of 36-19 with Houston winning by 18. So we have them winning by 18 here. We have them projected by 16 and PFF 24.5. The line's only minus 13. So that's one that really jumped out at me. And another thing that jumps out is this YPP number. So Houston's playing at 10.3. That's absurd. That's like one of the top 10 in college football as far as efficiency in yards per game and points scored. So their offense is clicking. And then South Florida is 17.1. That's in the bottom 25%. It's worse than league average. It's not as good. That's a huge gap to have right there in standard yards. So, and we have a gap here of 185 yards. And you can look, both offenses, kind of sitting there, although Houston's been playing much better. But again, defensively, this is what jumps out at me. 115th, South Florida's given up 477 yards defensively per game. And then Houston's 14th least. They're only giving up 315 yards per game. So even though Houston's slightly better on offense, much better defense over here. So I'm going to go ahead and lay the, what did we say that spread was? 13. I'm going to lay the 13 here, and I really like that. South Florida, let's go take a look at a game log real quick. I can't remember if I earmarked, when I'm trying to find the 5 or 6 for the article and write that next, but it takes the video so long to upload. I wanted to go ahead and do the video first. So South Florida, so they just got beat by ECU 29-13, and then they beat Temple. Let's see, Tulsa was a tight game. SMU, they got beat up on. So SMU and Houston are really comparable as far as teams. So South Florida was a 21.5-point dog and lost 41-17. So I think that's closer to what we're going to see in this game. Our model projects it really close to that. And then ECU just beat them by, 15? And so let's look at ECU and Houston and see what their power rankings are, see if they're close. So Houston has a power rating of 46, and then ECU has 39. So ECU just beat them by more than the spread, and they're not as good of a team. So I like Houston here laying the points. Real quick, some stats that I did have that I forgot to miss is the Oklahoma State game. Oklahoma State is 6-0 ATS last 6 games. West Virginia is 2-2 ATS last 4 games. Baylor is playing TCU. That was one of our plays. TCU is 1-6 ATS on the year. Baylor's 5-1 ATS last 6 games. And then the Wisconsin game, Rutgers 1-3 ATS last 4. Wisconsin 3-1 ATS last 4. So I'll have those in the article. And then the other ones, I think I've got all the information I need. Yeah, Florida, comparable there. Okay, yeah, so those are the games we have. Sorry this video ran a little long. I like to walk through and show you what I'm looking at, what I see, how I look at game logs, how I look at the NCAA betting sheets, and then just kind of go from there. So good luck, guys. Go win a bunch of money Saturday so we can dump it all out there on Sunday and make some risk.